This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about how Bitcoin culture gets corrupted. We're going to be talking about the slippery slope of cultural decay. Here's one modern example of cultural decay. We had the decriminalization of porn maybe 70, 80 years ago, where we said we don't want to be Puritans now, do we? Then what followed really was the normalization of porn values in movies and shows. Then the spread of no-fault divorce laws, ironically pioneered by Ronald Reagan when he was governor of California. And the cumulative effects of these developments on dating, marriage, family formation, and the subsequent implosion of the family have been quite bad for at least two generations of kids and young adults in particular. And this is not only a moral or religious issue, there's lots of definitive research now on the bad effects of porn on the brain, and especially on the brains of growing young men. And it's folly, or even worse, if there are any children involved, it's folly to think that the grass is greener on the other side. You should just hop from relationship to relationship or marriage to marriage, made much easier and normalized by no-fault divorce. You can quibble over the individual details and causes here, but I'm putting this forth just as an example of how culture can change a lot and how you can boil the frog slowly and no one notices until it's too late. That's definitely something we don't want to happen to Bitcoin culture. And I really like this example of the pornification of culture because one of the biggest creators of spam on Bitcoin, the ordinals inscriptions exploit, Casey Rodarmor, is also well known for a short written piece about a man who wants to do vile, disgusting things to a dog. When I tell you that I wouldn't let these scammers babysit my dog, you now know another reason. Now, this is definitely not a safe for work or home or normal human beings thing, but it does give you a good window into the degeneracy of some members of the Bitcoin spam camp. And I remember when David Bailey offered on Twitter to publish this short story in Bitcoin Magazine, though I'm not sure if he ever did. I couldn't find it anywhere. So I'll put a link to this. I really don't suggest reading it. It's called Wanko Manko. So Casey Rodarmor is not only a crypto degenerate who invented inscription spam, he's also, in my opinion, a cultural degenerate which won't surprise anyone who's been paying attention. Now, onto the problem of Bitcoin cultural change. All cultures are vulnerable to cultural decay, and Bitcoin is no different. Cultural decay is a slow, cumulative process. Fortunately, there are always people who see what's happening and try to fight the cultural decay and warn other people. And Bitcoin has always had this sort of cultural immune system, which today is called the toxic Bitcoin maximalists, but used to be called just Bitcoiners. And I think that in itself is a pretty big marker for cultural decay in itself, that change in the naming of people who stand up for Bitcoin and call out shipcoiners. Toxic Bitcoin maxis like me and many others have been publicly calling out crypto scammers and their scams for many years. We're the Bitcoiners who saved many people from BlockFi, Voyager, Celsius, FTX, and other scams over the years. And you can take a look at my YouTube video history for all of the timestamp details. And many of you watching today, of course, also lived through these times with me. And while we were trying to save people and their money from these scams, we had to contend with prominent quote-unquote Bitcoiners like Udi Wertheimer, who were actively collecting affiliate commissions while leading the sheep to slaughter, trying to profit by undermining everything that we were doing. This is a tweet. Hello, Bitcoiner. Just to let you know, your favorite Bitcoin maxis cost you an easy 30% in a single week, talking about the Terra Luna Ponzi, which you got many people in. And here's Udi shelling affiliate codes to FTX shortly before it went under. So it probably won't surprise you much that Udi later moved on to his next scam, which was co-founding a company to put spam on Bitcoin using the very hack invented by the dog porn author Casey Rodarmor. This is, of course, Taproot Wizards, which was funded by UTXO Management and founded by Eric Wall and Udi. Here is Taproot Wizards, part of UTXO Management's portfolio. UTXO Management, of course, is the crypto VC company, the crypto VC firm run by David Bailey, who also runs Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin Conference, the one that was recently in Las Vegas, and they have conferences in Asia as well. So what does it say about Bitcoin culture today when the guy running so many Bitcoin projects is himself a crypto VC who loves Bitcoin spam and has helped to fund bad actors in the space like Udi and the Taproot Wizards, and is also very happy to sell you a JPEG of a Bitcoin rock for $500,000, or just a regular rock here being offered for 5 BTC, so a little more than $500,000. If you're enjoying this video so far, I'd just pause really briefly here to ask you to help to support this channel's educational mission. Hit the subscribe button. That does really help. Leave a like, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video, and share this video with a friend or family member. Here's Bitcoin Magazine giving a platform to spam as well a couple years ago, and also link to this video, Who's Getting Rich from Bitcoin Spam. There's a picture of David Bailey right there. But it gets even worse because now David Bailey is putting on conferences that give scammers and spammers a huge platform, while of course trying to pump his own scammy investments from UTXO Management like Taproot Wizards. It's hard to believe the kind of people that Bailey is willing to give a platform at his conferences, like scammer Trace Mayer, who used to be a very interesting Bitcoiner and definitely contributed solid things to the space, but it makes you wonder if he actually ever owned any Bitcoin, because he was caught trying to dump Mimble coin on Bitcoin plebs at a Bitcoin conference a few years back. This was the piece of paper he was handing out. Famously, he handed out one of these to American HODL, who told people about it. And this says, Mimble coin, Mimble applied to the base layer, scarce, censorship resistant, durable, indestructible, saleable, portable, good money, up to 100x in BTC in 2 months, and he had a website. So this is what Trace Mayer was doing. He was literally scamming Bitcoiners, naive Bitcoiners, newcomers. Obviously, American HODL wasn't taken in by this, but he was trying to scam new Bitcoiners at a Bitcoin conference. And now David Bailey is giving this guy a platform. Like, how could you ever trust a guy like this again? But it gets worse. Here's David Bailey shaking hands with one of the co-founders of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse, at the Bitcoin conference. Malicious actors and longtime enemies of Bitcoin like Brad Garlinghouse need to be shunned and ostracized, not given free publicity like David Bailey is doing here. And I'm not even sure what you're supposed to do with your hand after shaking hands with someone like Brad. I'm not sure that pure soap and water is strong enough to get off the stench and filth of a scammer like that. As Marty Ben points out here, it's incumbent on the adults in the industry not to feed the XRP scam. It is an overt attack on uneducated retail investors. So why is the head of the Bitcoin conference reaching out and being nice to this guy? Here's all the sheep being led to slaughter. I guess there was an XRP conference in Vegas at approximately the same time. Here are 1,000 people who paid to attend this complete scam. And XRP is worse than a scam because they're also in bed with governments and central bankers trying to help them launch CBDCs. So these people are the antithesis of the cypherpunk ethos and the antithesis of what Bitcoin has stood for over the years. Ripple, the founding corporation that issued XRP, partners with 10 governments to develop CBDCs. Again, do you really want to be seen shaking hands with a company that's been so toxic and noxious for the space? And when newcomers to Bitcoin see David Bailey giving people like Trace Mayer or Brad Garlinghouse a platform, these newcomers may be led to believe that there's nothing wrong with shitcoins or their founders, and they may end up buying and getting wrecked by things like XRP, as has happened to so many people. The only difference was that in the old days, the head of a Bitcoin conference would have been calling out scammers like this rather than reaching out a hand to them. Brad Garlinghouse and his ilk have ruined many, many lives. And when I saw this picture of David Bailey and Brad Garlinghouse shaking hands, I was actually immediately reminded of the political theater that we've had to endure in the U.S. for so many years, where politicians will call each other the devil during campaigns and then be laughing and slapping each other on the back and hanging out together after the election. And when this happens, you can be sure that it's the American voter who's getting screwed by both sides. And when you see something like this, when you see a crypto VC being friends with a scammer, you know that bad things are up. It's something like this where everyone's all buddy-buddy and they're actually on the same team, even though they pretend to be on different teams when it comes to elections. I think Giacomo Zucco does a great job of summarizing all the scammers who were given a platform at the Las Vegas Bitcoin conference last week. He says here, literal shipcoin tokens, not even fake L2s or stablecoins as official sponsors, Babylon, Bitcoin OS, Dog, Goat, Kalshi. I'm not going to go through all these literal shipcoin creators on stage as speakers: Trace Mayer, Harry Halpin, Casey Rodarmor, Justin Sun, Eric Trump. Vocal shipcoin promoters on stage as speakers, etc., 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 and then explicitly and vocally shipcoin promoting companies like Casa, of course, and Coinbase. So these are the kind of people that David Bailey is platforming, and these are the kind of speakers who are speaking at the conference. Let me play this.
You know, a thing in the past for Bitcoin used to be not your keys, not your coin. And you've got a platform that I think really addresses that, and it's kind of squashed that notion that if it's, you know, not your keys, not your coin, you know, there's safe and secure ways to actually create product to hold Bitcoin. So can you talk about how we've transitioned from this not...
So here's a guy in the suit completely contradicting the entire cypherpunk ethos of Bitcoin. As Dax Skywalker points out here, I used to wonder how people just let their money get debased or debauched and went along with the gold to fiat transition. But after seeing people screech that JPEGs are money too, in other words, spam on Bitcoin, and that holding your own keys and running a node is too hard, I'm starting to see how it happened. And there's this famous guy who warned the West about how Marxists infiltrated and how they corrupt culture. What you're seeing here is how Bitcoin culture gets degraded over time, and even the thought leaders become corrupted by shitcoins and spam and then lead everyone else astray. And the real problem with David Bailey is, of course, he has this VC crypto arm of his business. And so, of course, he's going to be tolerant of these people. But he's not the guy who should be running the big Bitcoin conference. Frog is being boiled alive in real time. Scammers and spammers are being given huge platforms. People are being told at these conferences that holding your own private keys doesn't matter anymore, while in yet another corner of the Bitcoin ecosystem, you have Bitcoin Core itself intent on pushing through a software update that will take away the power from Bitcoin node runners to determine what goes on in their own mempools, which is a hugely pro-spam development. So Bitcoin Magazine is pro-spam, the Bitcoin Conference is pro-spam, David Bailey funds and platforms pro-spam companies, and then Bitcoin Core's actions are also always in the direction of more spam. They avoid contentious PRs that want to limit spam while embracing equally contentious PRs that open up more space for more spam on Bitcoin. You can, if you want to catch up on that, you can watch my last 3 weeks of videos on this topic. So is Bitcoin being subverted from within? That's certainly what it looks like to me. You can never know what's going on inside of people's heads, but whether they're intending it or not, these are definitely bad developments for Bitcoin. And then we have one of the Bitcoin Core devs himself, Peter Todd, saying the Bitcoin blockchain is just a chain of blocks. He said this just 2 days ago. The Bitcoin blockchain is just a chain of blocks like any other blockchain. It's nothing special. This is the guy, one of the guys in the inner sanctum working on Bitcoin Core. And as I said in this tweet, I present to you one of our amazing Bitcoin Core devs. Any chance that the Ethereum Foundation has a spot for him, that's probably be a better match. As Hodling Like I Mean It points out, I think this is a good summary of toxic Bitcoin maximalism. A toxic Bitcoin maximalist is simply someone who truly understands what fix the money, fix the world means, is not willing to play games with what's likely our only shot at destroying fiat. You really don't want to hurt Bitcoin with spam or anything else like that when we're trying to overthrow the central bankers. Number 3, a toxic Bitcoin maximalist understands that as pristine and ingenious as Bitcoin is, its success is not preordained and it needs gatekeepers of ethos and culture. And that's why I'm making this video about cultural decay in Bitcoin. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and we need to be vigilant against actors like David Bailey and what they've been doing in Bitcoin. A toxic Bitcoin maximalist realizes those whose actions don't rigorously embody all of the above can hardly be called Bitcoiners at all. So what can you do to help? You can boycott Bitcoin Magazine, the Bitcoin Conference. And I'm not saying there weren't many great speakers and great Bitcoiners there, but the real problem is when you have the nice plants mixed in with the weeds, and it confuses people, and I'm not sure why the nice plants would want to hang out with weeds. That's a pretty bad metaphor. But anyway, boycott Bitcoin Magazine, the Bitcoin Conference, call out other Bitcoiners when they promote scams, people like Trace Mayer, have them banished, and definitely don't give them a new platform and bring them back when they've never made a public apology. That's just pathetic. Also, dump Bitcoin Core and run Bitcoin Knots instead. You can learn how to run your own Bitcoin Knots node and take back your self-sovereignty here. I'll link to all of these, this post that I did that has links to many different videos, as well as my video how to configure Bitcoin Knots once you have it installed, and Satoshi 21's videos about Bitcoin configuration as well on Start 9, as well as this video, which goes through some of the history of Bitcoin culture if you want to situate today's discussion in it. And Bitcoin culture and Bitcoin Core itself have always been anti-spam until recently. So it makes you wonder, are we seeing social influence here? Are we seeing financial influences making these, changing Bitcoin culture in this way? It's a little bit hard to tell. But I like this analogy of the pornification of culture to the shitcoinification or spamification of Bitcoin culture. The important thing to remember is that when you let one cockroach into the house, he will bring all of his friends. And so the only question for you is, do you want 0 cockroaches or do you want thousands of cockroaches? Because if you don't do something about that first cockroach, you're going to end up with many, many more. And when you normalize shitcoin scammers and spammers, as is being done today, when you sit back and do nothing about malicious miners bypassing the P2P network and putting spam directly on the chain, or about Bitcoin devs who are openly telling people that there's nothing special about Bitcoin like Peter Retod did. I think that's my new name for him, Peter Retod. When you platform speakers who tell people that it's not important to do not your keys, not your coins, as we saw with that one video, you are chipping away at Bitcoin culture one brick at a time. Now, Bitcoin's not going to die overnight, but you will end up driving away the serious people who want to be self-sovereign and hold their own keys and run their own nodes and police their own mempools and not have anything to do with shitcoins. And you also end up with a bunch of suits and fiat maxis and shitcoiners, which is what the Bitcoin conference certainly appeared to be this year. When you encourage spammers and scammers, you get more of them, and the whole culture changes. And I think there's really no better example of that change than seeing how the Bitcoin conference itself and how it looks has changed over the years. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.